Hey, good morning. Sorry, I was having trouble getting my Zoom to launch again this morning. Still not sure what I'm doing wrong. Okay, all right. So I don't know who all is going to join us this morning because there's a lot that have just been jumping in and getting their tests done, and I'm hoping they're just reviewing on their own, and maybe that's why they don't feel like they need the review. I don't know. But here's what I want to do. So I'm going to pretty much walk through the combo test and do a good review. That way you can jump in and knock it out and hopefully do fantastic on it. So for the most part, it does go in order. The first few questions are going to be about World War I. The second few questions will be about the 1920s. And then the matching at the end will have just kind of a little bit of both. So we're going to review the World War I stuff first because that's been a couple of weeks. And then we'll make sure that you remember everything from last week for the 1920s. And I'm going to make sure that I keep checking my waiting room, make sure I don't miss anybody else that's joining this morning. Okay, so you should notice, this is good news, you should notice that there are a lot of repeat questions from the quiz. You should notice that there are questions that you might get kind of a deja vu feeling. Yes, you have seen them before because they were quiz questions, and hopefully you got them right on the quiz and you'll get them right on today's combo test. Okay, all right, so just going to throw some things at you. Make sure that you remember them for when you knock out the test, okay? So let's see. Let me start from the beginning, okay? So World War I, the United States is going to be isolated. We're not getting involved. It's a whole ocean away. We're not part of Europe. We don't have any family members part of this little family feud that's going on. And the first domino to fall, and again, don't let this trick you on the test, is that it's the Archduke of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire that's heir to the throne that is assassinated. Now, that he's not the reason why every country jumps in. Great Britain kind of drags their feet on getting involved in the war. They don't get involved until Germany starts making their way towards France, and they cut through Belgium. And Belgium is a neutral country, and that's when Great Britain jumps in because they realize that the Central Powers are not playing by like the rules of warfare, that you don't go through and invade neutral countries. We know that Woodrow Wilson is president during World War I. He campaigns for his second term in office under the slogan of "He kept us out of war." Unfortunately, he's not going to keep that promise very long. We have two things that happen that push us into war. The first one is the sinking of the Lusitania in 1915. This all goes back to the Sussex Pledge, which is another question on your test, which is the Germans' way of saying that, because they were getting in trouble for sinking all these merchant ships that did not have anything to do with the war. And so they said, all right, well, here's what we'll do. We will issue a warning, and if your ship chooses not to turn around, then we're going to fire anyway, but we'll issue a warning. Well, they issued a warning on the Lusitania. The Lusitania said, we're just a cruise ship, got civilians on board, you can't mess with us. And they just kind of kept going. And they're like, well, we gave you a warning. So they fire and sink the Lusitania. And the second thing that pushes the U.S. into war is the Zimmerman Note. Again, another quiz question today, or test question rather, that says, Germany was trying to get Mexico to pick a fight with the United States, with us, and they were promising Mexico, if you do that, we'll help you gain back Texas, Arizona, New Mexico land that was lost during the Mexican-American War. So all those reasons kind of pushed us into declaring war. We start the draft, Selective Service Act, which is kind of like a lottery almost. We base it off of birthdays. And so we did have millions that volunteered, but we had to draft millions more, about 300 million men that go off to war. So Selective Service Act, again, that's a fancy way of saying the draft, and we do that by a lottery process. But then we also experience what we call the Great Migration, which is now that there's millions of jobs open, we see women stepping up to take up those open jobs, and we also see minorities. So the Great Migration is talking about African Americans that are moving from the South to the North for those better job opportunities. Now, we also talked about how race riots will start up after the war is over, because a lot of them don't want to give up those good, better paying jobs later on. Okay, now, a lot of vocab from the last couple of chapters. So World War I has the Committee on Public Information that is trying to sell the war, right? We're trying to encourage through propaganda posters for people to build their own victory gardens, right? Grow your own food so you don't have to buy what can be sent to soldiers. You've got the War Labor Board, War Industries Board, War Industries Board, which switches everything over to wartime production. We're not making lipstick, we're making bullets. We're not making clothes, we're making uniforms, kind of a thing. And then we have the National War Labor Board, which is stopping all strikes, because again, we can't afford to slow down when we're making things, especially during a time of war. And then we also have daylight savings time that comes about, because if we're trying to conserve fuel, because whatever you don't use, we're going to send to our soldiers, if we move everything back, we're going to get more daylight. So again, more daylight means our farmers can be out there longer, get crops in. We don't have to be burning fuel to be able to have more light to keep going during the day. So daylight savings time comes about. Sorry, hold on. I lost my place with what I was looking at. With women. So one thing we talked about, we said that women only are serving in two capacities. One is being nurses, and the other is doing clerical work. Well, there was a group of women that was sent overseas, and no women saw combat or actually fought. But we did have nurses that were deployed overseas to help with our injured soldiers. Hold on, I just saw another question. Oh, and don't forget, we do have the Espionage and Sedition Act that starts back up. Don't forget that espionage is talking about spying. So we're concerned about spies, German spies, especially during the war. And then, of course, we don't want anybody speaking out against the U.S. during this time of war. So the Espionage and Sedition Act pretty much silence anybody speaking out against the war or against the United States during World War I. Airplanes, new piece of technology, but we said that airplanes were used for observation in the beginning before they were later, we strap a machine gun to it and use it as a weapon later on. After the war is over, we have the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, that starts up, and they go on a wild witch hunt looking for communist spies. That's what the Red Scare is all about, is looking for communist spies. There's this fear that the U.S. is going to become a communist nation. Doesn't happen, but the fear is there. Let's see, hold on. Oh, one thing that we didn't really spend a whole lot of time talking about last time is whenever Russia comes out of the war in 1917 and they have their Russian Revolution, it's the group known as the Bolsheviks that takes over. And again, if they're having their own revolution, they're not going to be fighting in the war, which is also, so number one, it's the Bolsheviks as the group, but also they're not invited to the Treaty of Versailles Peace Conference. It's just the big four. So it's the US, Great Britain, France, and Italy make up the big four. So again, all these are answers to test questions. That's why we're talking about them. Okay. Let's see. All right, so who becomes president after Wilson and after World War I? Well, it is Warren G. Harding. We talked about him last week. We said Harding unfortunately, is one of the top 10 worst presidents. He has scandals that happen under him. He himself does not abide by the new Prohibition Amendment, which is eliminating alcohol. Remember, it's the 18th Amendment that takes alcohol away. Unfortunately, he dies in office. They think it's like a heart attack or stroke. And his VP, which is Calvin Coolidge, takes over for him. Coolidge wants to get back to focusing on America, getting back to what it was before the war. And he pretty much lets business kind of do its thing, which might be a bad thing because then they start to abuse workers and all the things. Excuse me. We have Henry Ford. We didn't really spend a whole lot of time talking about it last week, but the very beginning of cars. And Henry Ford, which comes out with the Model T, and he starts mass producing using the assembly line process, which is just learning a simple task. And it was pretty much, if my job is to put on the front tire, then that's all I do all day long is put on the front tire. But then I should know my job so well I can do it blindfolded with one hand behind my back, and I can pump out. They were making a new car every 90 minutes. That's how fast they were pumping out cars, thanks to the assembly line. We also talked about a couple of things. One was a bell ringer question talking about the Sacco and Vanzetti case. They're both immigrants. That's like strike one, because after the war is over, we are definitely full-on nativist, anti-immigrants, especially immigrants that are coming from around the Central Powers area in Europe. But they're anarchist immigrants, and that's like two strikes. Again, if you haven't done your bell ringer, that's the answer. Anarchist immigrants. So they don't believe in governments. They're not even from here, and regardless of the fact that there was not really any hardcore evidence against them, those two things alone made the jury say, it's got to be them, they're guilty, and they got the death penalty. So now the other thing besides going back to limiting immigration is the Scopes trial and the idea of, for the first time ever, teaching evolution in school. John Scopes, who's a science teacher, teaches evolution for the first time in school, and they end up, he's fired, he has to go to court over it because, well, up until then, we had not allowed the idea of teaching of evolution in schools. But everything's going to change because obviously we do today. Another bell ringer question from last week was talking about the Harlem Renaissance, which is focusing on the contributions of African Americans to art, music, literature, movies, everything else. And so it is pretty much showcasing their power, their capability, their strength, and their importance to our society and their contributions. Let's see. Speaking of scandal, that was one thing that I talked about a second ago. The Teapot Dome scandal is the scandal that happened under Harding's administration, or one of them anyway. And we don't know if he actually knew about it because we can't question him because he ends up having a stroke and dying. But Albert Fall, who was one of his secretaries in his cabinet, was illegally loaning and kind of renting out oil-rich lands that were part of the U.S. Navy's oil reserves and letting people make money off of it. I mean, people walked away making millions of dollars. So anyway, Teapot Dome scandal happens. Most Americans after the war want to get back to an isolationist policy and not get involved in any more foreign affairs. Again, we have prohibition, and the Volstead Act ensures that people follow the law that you cannot drink, make, or sell alcohol, and that's true for 10 years. The golden age of Hollywood. We didn't really spend a whole lot of time talking about movies last week, but 1927 is our first, what we call a first talking film. Up until that point in time, movies were black and white and silent. So our very first talking film, and it's going to be another 10 years before we have our first very color motion picture movie. So fun fact there. Last couple of things. We have Marcus Garvey, who comes on the scene and begins the Universal Negro Improvement Association, which is pretty much promoting Black pride and unity in the community. And again, all of this is happening during that Harlem Renaissance time, emphasizing African Americans' talent and skill and ability. And his Back to Africa movement, he said, we're not going to be appreciated here in the United States, so we need to move back to our ancestral homelands. That flops. That does not go very well. People don't move back to Africa, but that was something he tried to start up. All right, let's see if we've got anything else. All right, couple of terms and people, okay? Bessie Smith, famous blues singer. Langston Hughes, famous African-American poet. Babe Ruth, famous baseball player that comes about during the 1920s. Duke Ellington, again, Harlem Renaissance, famous African-American composer, pianist, multi-talented individual. Charles Lindbergh, all right, speaking of airplanes, he's the first man to make a solo flight across the Atlantic. Let's see. Oh, the Kellogg-Briand Pact. We talked about that last week in your packet. We said that we tried to outlaw war, that we tried to make it was illegal to start fights and wars again. That's not going to last long, but we try it. Another one of your terms was welfare capitalism, the fact that people can invest in their company, buying stocks, get benefits, things like that. And then there was another one. Oh, World War I stuff. Don't forget Sussex Pledge, propaganda. Again, it's opinion-based, advertisement, espionage, spying. Yeah, that's the big stuff. I tried really hard not to spend too much time going into stories. Sometimes I do better than others. But I've got the test in front of me. I was walking you through the test. So hopefully you won't think that was a waste of your time, because I was going over it, I promise. Now, what else? Is there anything that you want me to go back over, or a question you've got about something?
I think I'm good.
Okay, sorry. I know that was a lot of info, but I think you're fine, especially if you're able to jump in and go ahead and knock it out and get it done with all this fresh on your minds. We did literally just walk through the whole entire test. So I think you'll be fine. I do have a question while I've got you on here. I'm probably going to go ahead and start setting it up today on Google Classroom. We're not going to start it today, but I'm going to go ahead and start setting up the next chapter. Do you know when your mom might try and stop by and I'll have your stuff ready for you, your paper copies?
I haven't asked you today, but I can do it now.
Oh, wait, say that again.
I haven't asked her yet, but I can do it now.
Oh, okay. Well, like I said, she didn't have to get it today because we're not going to start anything. And I don't know that we'll even start it tomorrow because there's something else that I want to talk to you guys about tomorrow first. But we'll start it by Wednesday for sure. So it's just whenever she's available, I can have it ready.
All right.
Okay. All right. Well, if you're good, we'll go ahead and wrap it up, and I'll let you get to it.
All right.
Okay. All right. Have a good one.
You too.
All right. Bye.